Sophie Cunningham is sticking with the Fever. The team just announcing they re-signed her. ESPN reporting she agreed to a one-year deal to return. This will be the guard's second year with the Fever since being traded from the Mercury. Now, she only appeared in 30 games last season because of an injury, but she still finished fourth on the team in scoring.
Sophie Cunningham has made a move that has WNBA fans completely surprised, as the sharpshooting guard reportedly chose to align her future with the Indiana Fever alongside Caitlin Clark instead of prioritizing a more secure long-term financial situation elsewhere. A decision that has quickly turned into a major talking point across the league about what players are willing to sacrifice in pursuit of a championship opportunity. Now the big question is, did Cunningham make the right call by betting on Indiana's rising core and chasing success with Clark? Or should she have focused on stability and maximizing her career earnings? Sophie Cunningham has re-signed with the Indiana Fever, and on the surface it looks like a simple, feel-good decision. One of continuity and familiarity rather than surprise or drama. The Fever bring back a key fan favorite, while the core connection with Caitlin Clark and Lexi Hull remains intact, reinforcing the chemistry that helped define one of the franchise's most promising recent stretches and setting the stage for another run with a group that already understands how to play together.
And the Fever at 3 p.m. Eastern and ABC Monday this Thursday will be back in Oklahoma City for game.
Everything on the surface looks simple. Sophie Cunningham is back with the Indiana Fever, rejoining a team built around Caitlin Clark and its rising core, and on paper it feels like a clean continuation of momentum and chemistry heading into the next season. But the situation becomes more interesting when you revisit what Cunningham herself had said during the offseason. She made it clear she was looking for financial security, stability, and ideally a longer-term contract that would allow her to settle down, buy a home, and create some life certainty beyond basketball. Very understandable priorities for a veteran WNBA player who has spent years building her career since entering the league in 2019. Moving from Phoenix to Indiana and establishing herself as a reliable 3-and-D presence who brings value on both ends of the floor. That's why the final outcome, a one-year deal with Indiana, raises questions. It doesn't match the long-term security she publicly described wanting, which naturally leads to speculation about what shifted, whether the market didn't offer what she hoped, whether priorities changed, or whether she consciously chose to prioritize staying in a competitive environment with Clark and the Fever over personal financial certainty. And that tension between stated goals and final decision is exactly what has fans talking and debating what this move really says about her priorities.
Indeed the case, Sophie back with Indiana on a one-year deal. That part of it is sort of interesting just because she had said on her podcast previously, I forget the exact wording, but basically the idea was that she wanted to be able to like settle down somewhere and feel cozy and wanted a big contract in that sense. So, a big contract I'm sure applies monetarily, but also maybe, annually as far as the years that are on it. But this is not that. So perhaps Sophie sacrificing that sort of security in order to run it back with the Fever. Of course, it was great for her career to play with the Indiana Fever, to play alongside Caitlin Clark.
WNBA commentator Robin Lundberg broke down the situation in a very straightforward way, highlighting the contrast between what Sophie Cunningham said she wanted heading into the offseason and the deal she ultimately signed with the Indiana Fever. Cunningham had openly talked about prioritizing long-term security, financial stability, and the ability to settle down after years in the league. Yet she ultimately agreed to a one-year contract in Indiana alongside Caitlin Clark, which has led many to interpret the move as a deliberate trade-off between personal stability and competitive opportunity. From that perspective, the decision looks less like a traditional free agency win and more like a calculated bet on herself, on the Fever, and on the idea that one strong season in a high-profile environment could position her for an even stronger contract next year. Whether it's driven by belief in a potential championship run, chemistry with the current roster, or the chance to elevate her market value, the outcome is the same. Cunningham is choosing short-term opportunity over long-term certainty, a choice that naturally sparks debate about how far players are willing to go when chasing both success and security in the modern WNBA landscape. What Sophie Cunningham is giving up by accepting a one-year deal with the Indiana Fever mainly comes down to stability and long-term certainty that a short contract means she'll be back in free agency again soon, which naturally carries risk. Injury concerns, shifts in team direction, or changes in salary cap flexibility across the league could all affect her future options. It also limits the kind of long-term planning she previously talked about, like settling in one place, buying a home, and building a more permanent off-court life. From that angle, the decision clearly prioritizes short-term opportunity over long-term security. She's essentially betting on herself and on Indiana's trajectory alongside Caitlin Clark, hoping that a strong season could lead to an even better contract down the line. But it's important to separate interpretation from certainty, because while the situation does reflect a trade-off, the reasons behind it, market offers, personal preference, team fit, or competitive goals, aren't fully known publicly. What can be said confidently is that she chose flexibility and opportunity now over guaranteed stability later, and that naturally fuels discussion about priorities in today's WNBA environment. For Sophie Cunningham, the appeal of staying with the Indiana Fever goes beyond just contract structure or financial certainty. It's also about opportunity, visibility, and the chance to compete at the highest level alongside a rising core built around Caitlin Clark. That combination, playing for one of the most watched teams in the league, being part of a rapidly developing contender, and chasing a legitimate championship window, can, for some players, outweigh the appeal of longer-term security. Elsewhere, in that sense, Cunningham's decision is being viewed by many as a bet on environment and trajectory rather than guaranteed stability. That IT also reflects the broader attention Clark brings to the franchise. The presence of a high-profile star changes how teams are perceived, how games are watched, and how quickly chemistry and identity form within a roster. Alongside teammates like Lexi Hull, the group's growing connection, often referred to informally by fans as the Trace Letches Trio, has become part of that narrative of continuity and shared momentum. With Aaliyah Boston also reaffirming her commitment to Indiana, the message from the core is increasingly clear. This is a group that wants to stay together and compete now, building on chemistry rather than constantly resetting. And that collective buy-in is a major part of why this Fever roster continues to draw so much attention. These players clearly believe in what the Indiana Fever are building, and that belief shows up in their willingness to stay together and compete alongside Caitlin Clark. But it's not just about chemistry or good vibes. There's also a very real strategic element behind decisions like the one made by Sophie Cunningham. From a business and career standpoint, signing a one-year deal is a calculated risk. Cunningham is effectively betting that increased visibility, playing on one of the most watched teams in the league, appearing in nationally televised games, and being part of constant social media attention, will raise her profile enough to improve her market value when she re-enters free agency. And that assumption isn't unreasonable. Indiana's current spotlight means every player in the rotation benefits from exposure that simply doesn't exist at the same level elsewhere in the WNBA. That can translate into stronger endorsement opportunities, a larger fan base, and more leverage in future contract negotiations. However, the trade-off is real. By prioritizing exposure and opportunity now, Cunningham is accepting uncertainty later. If performance, health, or team success doesn't go as planned, the payoff she's betting on may not materialize the way she expects. What makes this decision risky is the uncertainty that comes with it. If the Indiana Fever don't reach a championship level, if Sophie Cunningham sees her role reduced, if her shooting numbers dip, or if injuries enter the picture, any of those outcomes could directly impact her future market value and weaken the long-term contract she originally wanted. On top of that, age becomes a real factor. At 30 years old, Cunningham is in the later stage of a WNBA career where every remaining season matters more in terms of financial security, meaning repeated short-term deals increase pressure to eventually secure a multi-year contract before time runs out. But on the flip side, what Indiana is gaining is also clear. A reliable veteran shooter who can space the floor for Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston, a physical defender willing to do the dirty work, and a disciplined role player who understands her job without needing high usage, all of which are valuable pieces for a team trying to build a serious contender. All of these elements are extremely valuable for a team with championship ambitions like the Indiana Fever, because Sophie Cunningham provides more than just scoring. Her perimeter shooting forces defenses to stay honest, preventing them from collapsing into the paint, and in turn creating cleaner driving lanes for Caitlin Clark and better interior opportunities for Aaliyah Boston. While her ability to hit threes consistently changes how opposing defenses are structured against Indiana's offense. Defensively, she brings a physical, gritty presence on the wing, willing to guard top perimeter scorers and compete in tough matchups, even if she isn't an elite stopper, and that kind of effort and toughness is still highly valuable in playoff-level basketball. On top of that, the chemistry factor is significant. Cunningham, Clark, and Lexi Hull have already developed clear on-court and off-court cohesion, built on communication, trust, and familiarity, which is not easily replicated and takes time to develop, making Cunningham's return not just a talent decision, but also a continuity move that reduces the risk of disrupting an already forming core identity. From the Indiana Fever's point of view, bringing back Sophie Cunningham on a one-year deal is essentially a low-risk, high-value move. They retain a proven contributor without locking themselves into long-term salary commitments that could restrict future roster flexibility around key pieces like Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston. Where the debate really begins is on Cunningham's side of the equation. One interpretation is that she's strategically betting on herself, using a high-visibility environment in Indiana to boost her value and set up a stronger contract next offseason. The other view is that she's accepting meaningful risk by passing on potential long-term security when it might have been available elsewhere. Both readings can be true at the same time, which is why the decision is being heavily discussed. What's clear is that Cunningham has prioritized competing in a winning environment over locking in stability, and that choice becomes more significant when viewed against her earlier stated desire for long-term financial security. More broadly, this situation highlights a structural reality of the WNBA. The salary framework and contract landscape often force players into difficult trade-offs between security, opportunity, and team fit, especially in a league where roster building and competitive windows are constantly shifting.